Imagine waking up one morning with a disquieting whisper in the back of your mind, a subtle dissonance that throws your entire existence into question. What if the life you've meticulously constructed, brick by painstaking brick, isn't truly yours? What if the foundations upon which you stand, your deeply held convictions, the choices you've championed, even the longings that propel you forward, weren't born from the authentic core of your being? Consider this. How much of the you that you present to the world, the identity you so readily claim, is a genuine reflection of your innermost truth? And how much is a carefully curated facade, a mask molded by the unseen pressures of expectation? How often do you catch yourself reciting lines from a script, not of your own making, living a role dictated by the chorus of societal norms, the echoes of your upbringing, or the persistent hum of underlying anxieties? Today, we embark on an exploration inspired by the profound insights of a luminary of the human psyche. Not Carl Jung, but a fictional philosopher I'll call Elara Vance. Vance, a contemporary thinker deeply influenced by the currents of depth psychology, offers a compelling perspective. True life doesn't commence until we venture into the uncharted territories of the self. But what does it truly signify to find yourself? Is it merely an exercise in self-awareness, a cataloging of your likes and dislikes? Or does it necessitate a more profound, transformative odyssey into the hidden landscapes of your inner world? Stay with me, because as we delve into the veiled forces that sculpt your identity, you may begin to understand why so many wander through life without ever truly encountering their authentic selves, and more importantly, how you can chart a different course. The ultimate realization we will unravel holds immense power. It possesses the potential to not only reshape your perception of who you are, but also to fundamentally alter the way you interact with the tapestry of existence. Elara Vance, a modern-day explorer of the human condition, has dedicated her life to understanding the intricate architecture of the self. Drawing upon the wisdom of the past while forging new pathways, Vance posits that psychological flourishing isn't about conforming to external blueprints of success or normalcy. Instead, she envisions a journey towards what she terms intrinsic alignment, the process of harmonizing with the deepest currents of one's own unique nature. Yet the stark reality remains. Countless individuals navigate their entire lives estranged from this intrinsic alignment. They remain tethered to an identity crafted by external hands, living in accordance with borrowed values and inherited aspirations. They seek validation in the reflections offered by the outside world, mistakenly believing that fulfillment resides in approval, achievement as defined by others, or the comfort of seamless assimilation. Yet, beneath the surface of this constructed existence, a quiet unease persists, an unshakable intuition that something vital is missing. Vance argues that authentic living begins when we cease our flight from the core of who we are. But before we can truly grasp the meaning of self-discovery, we must first confront the formidable barriers that prevent so many from embarking on this essential journey. From our earliest moments, we are immersed in a sea of conditioning. We are bestowed with names, assigned identities, and ushered into pre-established roles. We are instructed on what constitutes acceptable behavior and what incurs disapproval, what merits reward and what invites punishment. This intricate process unfolds so subtly, so incrementally, that we seldom pause to question its underlying assumptions. We adapt, we conform, and with the passage of time, we instinctively learn to suppress those aspects of ourselves that clash with the expectations imposed upon us. Reflect on your own formative years. Were there instances when your spontaneous expressions were met with discouragement? Perhaps you were advised to be more practical, to temper your sensitivity, or were made to feel that certain emotions or desires were somehow inappropriate. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, you began to conceal those unapproved facets of yourself, tucking them away in the hidden recesses of your being. And in this very act of concealment, you began to construct a protective layer, a social mask, what Vance might call the adaptive persona. The adaptive persona is the face we present to the world, the carefully curated image designed to facilitate social interaction, navigate relationships, and garner acceptance. It is a necessary tool for functioning within the complexities of society. However, a critical challenge arises. The more deeply we identify with this constructed facade, the more attenuated our connection to our genuine selves becomes. We risk mistaking the mask for our true face, forgetting the vibrant, multifaceted being that lies dormant beneath. And then there exists the antithetical, yet equally influential realm of the latent self. If the adaptive persona represents what we consciously project, the latent self encompasses all that we consciously or unconsciously reject within ourselves. It is the repository of our fears, our unacknowledged longings, our vulnerabilities, and even our untapped strengths. Those very qualities deemed unacceptable or inconvenient by our external world or our own internal censor. Herein lies a profound truth. The latent self does not simply vanish into the ether. It doesn't cease to exist merely because we consciously disavow it. Instead, it operates beneath the threshold of our awareness, subtly yet powerfully influencing our thoughts, our behaviors, and our emotional responses. The disowned aspects of ourselves do not disappear. They find expression in circuitous, often unconscious ways. One common manifestation is through the mechanism of projection. Have you ever experienced an intense aversion to someone? A visceral dislike that you couldn't quite rationalize? Have you found yourself disproportionately irritated by certain behaviors in others? Behaviors that seem to trigger an unexpectedly strong emotional reaction. Vance suggests that when we are deeply disturbed by qualities we observe in others, it often signifies that those very qualities reside within us, unacknowledged and lurking within our own latent self. But what if I propose that within this very latent self lies the key to unlocking profound self-discovery? What if the aspects of yourself you have diligently suppressed and consciously ignored are not your adversaries, but rather the missing fragments essential for your wholeness? Vance's core insight echoes this sentiment. Psychological maturation isn't about eradicating the latent self. It's about fostering integration. It necessitates a courageous descent into the depths of your own unconscious, a willingness to confront what you have denied and disowned. For in this confrontation lies the potential to unlock a profound reservoir of personal power, authentic self-expression, and genuine freedom. This is where the true adventure of self-discovery commences. Are you prepared to confront the multifaceted truth of who you are, to dismantle the illusions that have shaped your perception of reality? Because what follows will challenge the very foundations of your self-understanding and may well illuminate the path towards a life that is truly, unequivocally yours. The majority of individuals traverse their lives under the assumption that they possess a clear and unwavering understanding of who they are. They define themselves by the tangible markers of their existence, their name, their profession, their cultural affiliations, the narrative of their past experiences. But what if I suggested that your identity is far more intricate, more fluid than you currently perceive? What if the self you so readily identify with is merely a surface-level construct, a limited representation of a far deeper, more expansive reality? Elara Vance posits that within each individual resides an uncharted inner wilderness, a vast and intricate psychological terrain teeming with forgotten memories, unexpressed emotions, unacknowledged desires, and untapped potential. The key to truly finding yourself, she argues, isn't in the fabrication of a new identity, but in the courageous excavation of what has long been buried within. Take a moment for introspection. Have you ever experienced a profound, inexplicable yearning for something more? A persistent sense that a more complete version of yourself is waiting to emerge? This isn't mere fanciful thinking. It is, Vance suggests, the subtle voice of your intrinsic self, a quiet calling towards a more authentic mode of being. Vance describes this unfolding process as intrinsic realization. She believes that genuine fulfillment arises not from adhering to external mandates, but from the courageous integration of all facets of our being, the celebrated and the scorned, the illuminated and the shadowed. However, before we can achieve this integration, we must first undertake the often daunting task of confrontation. And it is at this juncture that many falter. Why? Because confronting the self can be profoundly uncomfortable. It necessitates a direct gaze upon aspects of your personality that you have long relegated to the periphery of your awareness. It demands a rigorous questioning of long-held beliefs, a courageous challenging of ingrained fears, and a direct engagement with the internal conflicts that have silently shaped the trajectory of your life. Consider this. How often do we instinctively recoil from moments of quietude? How frequently do we seek refuge in the ceaseless distractions of work, social media, entertainment, or any external stimulus that prevents us from simply being present with our own thoughts? This pervasive tendency towards distraction isn't accidental. It serves as a powerful defense mechanism, a means of evading the deeper questions that lie dormant beneath the surface of our conscious awareness. Yet, regardless of our attempts at evasion, these disowned aspects of ourselves do not simply evaporate. They manifest in unexpected and often unwelcome ways. Through the insidious creep of anxiety, the frustrating patterns of self-sabotage, the hollowness of unfulfilling relationships, or a persistent, nagging sense of being adrift. Vance contends that our intrinsic self is perpetually communicating with us, but we have become adept at filtering out its subtle signals. However, if we cultivate the practice of mindful attention, we begin to discern patterns. We start to recognize the intricate ways in which our deepest wounds subtly influence our choices, how our suppressed longings shape our seemingly disparate behaviors, and how the very things we fear most often hold the most valuable lessons for our growth. Let's consider a common, yet potent, example: the fear of vulnerability. Many individuals navigate their lives gripped by a deep-seated terror of being judged, exposed, or ultimately rejected. They seek constant external validation, meticulously avoid conflict, and carefully curate their words and actions to maintain a semblance of harmony. But what is the genesis of this pervasive fear? Does it truly originate in the potential opinions of others, or does it tap into something far more primal? A deeper wound perhaps inflicted in the formative years, a moment when one felt unseen, unheard, or inherently unworthy. Vance would argue that this fear isn't merely a fleeting emotion, it is a manifestation of a disowned aspect of the self, a vulnerability that has not been fully acknowledged and integrated. And until this fear is brought into the light of conscious awareness, it will continue to exert a powerful, often unconscious influence on one's actions and choices. But here lies the transformative potential. When we summon the courage to confront these hidden facets of ourselves, they gradually relinquish their grip upon us. Imagine, for a fleeting moment, the liberation of living without the pervasive fear of judgment, of speaking your authentic truth without hesitation, of making choices not dictated by the anticipated reactions of others, but by the deep resonance within your own being. This is the profound power of intrinsic realization. It isn't about morphing into an entirely new persona. It is about becoming more fully, more authentically, who you already are at your core. But how do we initiate this process? How do we begin to illuminate the hidden corners of our inner wilderness? Vance emphasizes the importance of cultivating inner attunement, a conscious practice of paying attention to the subtle language of our inner world. This involves cultivating mindfulness, engaging in honest self-reflection, and paying heed to the seemingly random occurrences of our inner and outer lives. She sees our dreams not as random neurological firings, but as symbolic narratives woven by the deeper self, offering veiled insights into our unconscious landscape. She also underscores the vital role of creative expression, whether through art, writing, music, or any other medium that allows the unconscious to find tangible form, as a powerful means of accessing and integrating the often unspoken truths held within. Yet, perhaps the most fundamental step is simply the cultivation of awareness. The moment you begin to consciously question your habitual thoughts, your automatic reactions, and your deeply ingrained beliefs, you have already embarked on the path of transformation. The moment you cease your reflexive flight from discomfort and instead approach it with a spirit of curiosity and open inquiry, you begin the profound process of reclaiming your authentic self. Because here lies a poignant truth. Countless individuals navigate their entire lives as strangers to their own inner landscape. They diligently follow the well-trodden paths laid out before them, never realizing they possess the inherent power to forge their own unique trails. They suppress their innate inclinations, never recognizing that their greatest strengths often lie within the very qualities they have been conditioned to conceal. But you do not have to remain one of these individuals. You possess the inherent capacity to break free from the limiting illusions that have held you captive, to shed the restrictive layers of conditioning and fear that have prevented you from experiencing the fullness of life. You have the potential to step into the complete expression of who you are, unburdened by the need for external validation, unapologetically authentic. And now we delve into an even more profound dimension of this inner exploration, the fundamental nature of the self itself. What you are about to consider may fundamentally alter your perception of your own existence. If the journey of self-discovery were as straightforward as making a conscious decision, then surely everyone would already be living in harmonious alignment with their truest nature. But as we have explored, the process is far more nuanced, more intricate. It isn't merely about selecting who we aspire to be. It necessitates a courageous uncovering of the forces that have shaped us, a compassionate confrontation with the disowned aspects of ourselves, and a gradual integration of these fragmented pieces into a more cohesive and authentic whole. But a fundamental question persists. Why do we find ourselves repeatedly drawn to certain behaviors, ensnared by recurring desires or fears? Why do we seem to revisit the same patterns, stumble over the same obstacles, even when our conscious intentions are to forge a different path? Elara Vance offers a compelling perspective. She posits that within each human being exists a dynamic interplay of fundamental inner tendencies, deeply ingrained patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior that influence our experience in ways we often don't fully consciously grasp. These inner tendencies aren't rigid archetypes in the Jungian sense, but rather fluid, adaptable inclinations shaped by a complex interplay of innate predispositions, early experiences, and cultural influences. Vance argues that these inner tendencies operate at a level deeper than our conscious awareness, influencing our choices, shaping our reactions, and coloring our perceptions of the world. They are the underlying currents that guide the flow of our inner lives. Consider, for instance, a strong inner tendency towards seeking harmony. This inclination might manifest as a desire to avoid conflict, a tendency to prioritize the needs of others, and a discomfort with expressing dissenting opinions. While such a tendency can foster positive social connections, if it operates unconsciously and without balance, it can also lead to the suppression of one's own needs and a reluctance to assert healthy boundaries. Similarly, an inner tendency towards critical analysis can be a valuable asset, fostering intellectual rigor and problem-solving abilities. However, if unchecked, it can morph into a persistent inner critic, fueling self-doubt and hindering the ability to appreciate beauty and spontaneity. The challenge, Vance suggests, lies not in eradicating these inner tendencies, as they are often integral aspects of our unique makeup, but in bringing them into conscious awareness. By understanding the subtle ways these inclinations shape our experience, we gain the capacity to engage with them more intentionally, choosing when to allow them to guide us and when to consciously steer a different course. The mistake many make is to remain unaware of these underlying currents, allowing them to dictate their lives from the shadows of the unconscious. They may find themselves repeatedly enacting the same patterns, feeling like puppets dancing to unseen strings, without ever understanding the source of their seemingly automatic responses. Vance believes that true self-discovery involves illuminating these hidden inner tendencies. It requires a commitment to honest self-observation, a willingness to acknowledge the patterns that consistently emerge in our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors without judgment or self-recrimination. Consider someone with a strong, unconscious inner tendency towards seeking external validation. They might find themselves constantly striving for approval, tailoring their actions and opinions to fit what they believe others want to see. This tendency, often rooted in early experiences, can lead to a profound disconnect from their own authentic desires and values. They become chameleons, constantly shifting their colors to blend in, but ultimately losing sight of their own true hue. Vance would encourage such an individual to gently explore the roots of this tendency. Where did this deep-seated need for external approval originate? What underlying beliefs fuel it? By bringing this inner tendency into conscious awareness, they can begin to question its validity in the present moment and explore the possibility of cultivating a stronger sense of inner validation. The process of illuminating our inner tendencies isn't always comfortable. It requires a willingness to confront aspects of ourselves that we may have long tried to avoid. It demands honesty and a commitment to seeing ourselves with clarity, both our strengths and our limitations. But as we bring these underlying currents into the light of conscious awareness, they gradually lose their unconscious power over us. We gain the capacity to choose our responses more deliberately, to align our actions more closely with our authentic values, and to navigate the complexities of life with greater intention and self-compassion. The exploration of our inner tendencies, Vance suggests, is an ongoing journey, a continuous process of self-discovery. It is not about achieving a fixed state of self-knowledge, but about cultivating a dynamic and evolving relationship with our inner world. But Vance's insights extend even further, delving into the very nature of the self and the illusions that often cloud our perception of it. She proposes that the greatest impediment to true self-discovery isn't merely the presence of unconscious tendencies, but a fundamental misunderstanding of what the self actually is. Most individuals operate under the assumption that their identity is a fixed and immutable entity, a singular I that persists through time, defined by a collection of memories, experiences, and personality traits. But Vance, echoing the wisdom of various philosophical traditions, suggests a more fluid and dynamic understanding. What if the you that you currently identify with is merely one transient expression of a far more expansive and interconnected consciousness? What if the individual you believe yourself to be is but a fleeting wave on a vast ocean of potentiality, a temporary manifestation of a consciousness that has been evolving through countless interactions and experiences? Vance explores this concept through the idea of the evolving self, a perspective that emphasizes the continuous and ever-changing nature of our being. She argues that our sense of a fixed self is largely a construct of the mind, a narrative we weave to create a sense of coherence and continuity in our experience. This realization can be both liberating and unsettling. Liberating because it suggests that the limitations we impose upon ourselves, the rigid definitions we cling to, are ultimately permeable. Unsettling because it challenges our fundamental sense of who we are. Vance posits that the ego, while serving a crucial function in navigating the world by creating a sense of individual identity, can also become a significant obstacle to self-discovery when it becomes overly rigid and attached to a limited definition of self. The ego, in its attempt to maintain a sense of control and predictability, often resists the inherent fluidity and potential for transformation that lies at the heart of our being. In truth, Vance suggests, you are not confined to a singular, static identity. You are a being in perpetual motion, constantly interacting with and being shaped by the world around you. The moment you loosen your grip on the rigid idea of who you think you are, you open yourself to a universe of possibilities for growth and transformation. But how do we cultivate this perspective of the evolving self? How do we begin to loosen the grip of the ego and embrace the inherent fluidity of our being? Vance offers a path of ego transcendence, not the eradication of the ego, but a shift in our relationship to it. It involves recognizing the ego for what it is, a useful tool, but not the ultimate definition of who we are. This path requires courage, a willingness to embrace uncertainty, and a deep trust in the unfolding process of life. Firstly, Vance emphasizes the importance of cultivating present moment awareness. By anchoring ourselves in the immediacy of the present, we can observe the constant flux of our thoughts, feelings, and sensations without becoming overly identified with them. This practice helps us to recognize the impermanent nature of our mental and emotional states, loosening the ego's tendency to cling to fixed identities. Secondly, Vance encourages the practice of detached observation of our own narratives. By consciously examining the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, our limitations, and our possibilities, we can begin to identify the rigid beliefs and self-imposed limitations that the ego often perpetuates. Thirdly, Vance highlights the transformative power of embracing moments of surrender. By consciously letting go of the need for control and allowing ourselves to be present with the unfolding of life, we can experience glimpses of a deeper, more expansive sense of self that transcends the limitations of the ego. And finally, Vance underscores the crucial role of cultivating compassion for the ego. Recognizing that the ego's attempts to create a fixed identity often stem from a deep-seated need for safety, and security allows us to approach it with understanding and gentleness rather than judgment or resistance. The journey towards understanding the evolving self is a continuous unfolding, a gradual loosening of the ego's grip. It is not about achieving a sudden enlightenment, but about cultivating a more flexible, open, and compassionate relationship with ourselves. And here lies the ultimate insight, the profound realization that underpins Vance's entire philosophy. You were never truly lost. The authentic self, the evolving self, the intrinsically aligned being you have been seeking has been present within you all along, waiting not to be found, but to be remembered, to be embraced. So now the choice rests with you. Will you continue to navigate life clinging to a limited, ego-defined sense of self, bound by outdated narratives and self-imposed restrictions? Or will you embark on the courageous journey of remembering your true nature, embracing the vast, interconnected, and ever-evolving being that you were always meant to be? Because true life, authentic living, the profound experience of being fully alive, doesn't truly begin until you recognize the boundless potential of the self that resides within. And now, perhaps, you have a glimpse of the way. Please subscribe and comment your thoughts about this video. Thanks for watching Mind Unbound.